Hey guys, welcome to another episode of A Shot of Ruby. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking to you guys about creating custom queries with AREL. And creating a custom query can really help you get the most out of your database. So before we begin, I'd like to show you what it is we're trying to achieve. So over here, I've got my Rails console for my application loaded. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and make that query, right? So I'm going to do post equal post.published with tags and count limit 100. So don't pay attention to this with tags and count just yet. I'll explain to you where this came from. Just gonna run the query and you'll see that over here we have something very special. This column here contains the tags for each of the posts. So actually, let me just show you that. So this is the entire query, right? To get 100 items with the tags and the count of the tags of how many posts each tag has. It did it all in 5.1 milliseconds. So that is very quick. And this is the entire query. This is it, all of it. This is all of it that made all that happen. So I'm just going to select one post from that collection. And we can see here, this is the example post number 1, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do post.tags with count. So we basically have a hash, we have an array with hash inside. And the hash contains just what we need, the name of the tag and the post count for the tag. Alright, so now you guys understand what it is we're trying to achieve. Basically what we're trying to get is the post table. We just want to tack another column onto it, and this column has the data that we need for the tags. It's going to contain an array of hash, if you will, that's going to have the name of the tag and the post count. That's what we're trying to build with this column, right? So it's a dynamic column that we're going to add on to the post table that we have in our database. So I've broken it down to 4 steps. The first thing we need to do is we need to generate the tags table with post count. Now, if you remember back in episode 2 of this series, of this N+1 series, we did something similar. We generated the categories with post count. So we can actually use the same idea here. The query will look pretty much the same, right? So once we have that table, we need to use that table instead of the default table which is already in the database. With that table, we are now going to get the tag for each of the posts. So we're going to use the join table in the middle, the taggings table, to find out which tags should be with which post, and then we put it together, right? So once we get the tag for each of the posts, we need to convert the tag into HStore. Now, being that we're using HStore, this means that this whole video only applies to PostgreSQL. You can't do something like this with MySQL or SQLite. Another great advantage of using PostgreSQL. So once we have the tag and it's in HStore format, what's going to happen is Rails is going to convert that into a hash for us, because Rails 4.1 is compatible with HStore. Actually, Rails 4.0 is compatible with HStore. Now, the problem is each post can have many tags. So the result that we get from Postgres, it could be multiple tags. So it's going to be multiple hashes. So what we need to do is we need to store the matching tags in an array. So we're going to have an array of HStore for the 4th column, the tags with count column, right, for our post table. So basically, the tags with count column is going to have something like this. It's going to have the hash, name of the tag, and the count of the tag, right, the post count. So we need an array to store multiple tags. So this is the problem. This is the first problem we need to solve. The default table, which is in the database, does not have a post count. So what we need to do is we need to write that query. We need to build that query to generate the post count. So this is what the tags with post count looks like. So I'm going to explain to you why we need to write it in this format. The top one is if we just take what we learned from the second episode and just use it in here, this is what it'll look like pretty much. This is very similar. Well, it's exactly the same. We just change tags to categories and we have the same thing. Now, we can't really use something like this in an AREL query when we're building a custom query in with AREL. What will happen is we'll get like, these string characters escaping issues and all that kind of stuff, because we're going to mix this query into another query, and it's like 4 layers of querying. So what's going to happen is it's not going to be able to correctly build a query if we don't use AREL to help us out. So what we need to do is we need to use AREL. Now I'm going to explain to you basically all the syntax and all the the converted version here. So this is the AREL safe version, so we can mix this query with another query and it'll work just fine. Now, see this part here is this part here, this tags. And it figures out the name based on the class. So in this case, we're doing tag.ARELTable. So that tag.ARELTable represents this part here of the query, this tags over here. And basically, in the square brackets, you could put a column name or you could put something like this AREL.star, right? So AREL.star just represents this asterisk over here. Now, if we look at another example of this keyword ARELTable, which is right over here, you'll see that it has no class before it. It's just ARELTable. Now, we're going to be running this method, this tags with post count, in the post model. If we don't specify a class, it's going to default back to the class where this method is being called from, right? So in this case, it's going to be the post. So you could even rewrite this as post.ARELTable and it'll work just fine. But in this case, we don't need to. So, we're going to keep it short. So here it's ARELTable and then the column name. So check this out. Post.id, that's the column name, right? That's the table name. And then basically, because we're doing a database function called count, AREL has its own way of doing named functions, right? So this is it right here. We create a new instance of the name function. And yeah, we just pass it the name of the function we want to run. And basically we pass the argument in. So this is the argument right here. And this matches up with this right here. And then we need to make it count and then create a column as post count. So the way we do that is as post count, right? With the as keyword over here. Now, once we're done with that, we need to do the group, right? So group tags.id. So again, the tag.ARELTable is going to come because we have this tags over here. Then we select the ID, which is the column name. So here's the thing. We're now going to use a result from this query instead of the default one, which is in the database. So what we need here is as tags. So this as tags here is going to replace the original table from the database with our own, with the one that we just generated here with the post count, right? So that's why we need to reference it as tags. All right. So now we have this table. We're going to use this table instead of the default one in the database. All right. So this diagram might look a little bit crazy, but it's not that crazy. It's actually pretty simple. So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to get each tag for each of the posts. We need to use the join table to look it up, right? To look up which tag goes with which post. So to do that, what we need to do is on the taggings, we need to find, the post ID needs to match up with the ID, the primary key on the post table, right? So once we figure out, we can look up, okay, so post ID 1, tag ID 2. Okay, so now we know that we need to load tag ID 2 for post 1. And we need to load tag ID 3 for post ID 2. 1 for 3 and so on, right? So once we figure out which tags go with which post, we can use that to load the data. So here we're just selecting the 2 columns, the name column and the post count column, right? And that's what's going to become our tags with count, right? So let's take a look at the query. So we're going to use a join table, right? So just look at this query up here. Ignore this bottom one for now. So we're going to joins taggings, right? And we're going to do a select. So we're going to select the table name tag.AREL table. So basically this translates to tags.name, and it's tags.name, but then we have a custom from. And then we also have a tags.postCount, if you will. And the reason why we can do post count now is because the from tags with post count. So check this out. The name of the method here, all we're doing is just calling this method down here. Now, because we have this as tags, it's going to use the table that we generated with a query instead of the default one in the database, as I was mentioning before. So that's why we can select the name and the post count, right? Now, where tagging's AREL table, so we go back to that diagram for a sec. Tagging's post ID equals post.id, right? So if I go back to that query, tagging AREL table post ID equals AREL table. Again, we're not prefixing this with any class, which means it's going to default to the post, right? So this is like saying post.AREL table.id, right? As tag, right? So now we're getting, once we get the result, we're going to reference it as the tag. So now the next step is we need to convert that tag into HStore. So we head over to the next query, right? So we're going to store the result as HStore. So here it is. Over here we have tags HStore, and all it is we're doing a select here. So because we're doing tag.AREL table, we can't use a select. We don't have access to the select method anymore. So the equivalent of the AREL table is project. So project and select are the same thing. But if I did select tag.select, it would work. But if I do with AREL table, that would not work. So I would have to use project. So basically project is select. So we're selecting, and then we're just getting this HStore, and then see this tag over here that we referenced from the previous query. So this over here. So this over here links from this over here. So this function just converts the result that we get from this whole query into HStore. So over here from tagging. So tags from tagging is over here. And then basically, it's just another layer of query, another layer, and another layer. So basically, tags from taggings goes here, and then tags with post count goes over here. That's basically how we're building our query. So now, once we get the tag, we need to put it inside of an array. So, which takes us to the next query. So up here, way up here, array of tags HStore. So basically, we're using the name function once more with the array, and we're passing tags HStore, which is this guy over here, as tags with count, right? So basically, this is the basic construct of the query that we're trying to build, right? So that should be clear now, how we're getting that extra column with the tags with count and an array of HStore, right? This pretty much explains all of that. So in the next step, I'm going to implement this code into our Rails application, and you'll see how it all works together. All right, so here we are. I have applied the methods that we talked about in the slides, and I've applied them all over here. I've put them all in under the class method, so I don't have to use a self like that every time. So basically, this will allow me to do something like this. So post array of tags HStore. So I just call this method, and this method calls, it invokes this method, which invokes this guy here, and then this guy invokes this guy here, and it goes all the way down. So basically, AREL doesn't actually run any queries. It's just used to build queries. It's just used to build, the actual query itself, but it doesn't execute the query. So what we need to do is we need to use this select clause over here. And what I'm doing here is AREL table because we're in the post model over here. Again, like this is going to be post.star. So we're just selecting all the columns and including the stuff that the stuff that we want, the extra column that we need to build with this particular query over here. So we're just putting it in an array. It's just a select, and I'm gonna package it up in with tags and count scope. So to use all of this stuff in the controller, all we need to do is just simply call the scope. So with tags and count, I'm just going to copy that and paste it like that. And that's the code that I was using in the console before when I was showing you guys. So since now we have the tags and the count all in one go using the scope, we no longer need this guy. So we can remove that. And in our view, we need to use the correct method. So I'm going to head over into the partial over here and tags with count. And here, because the result that we're going to get from each of these tags is going to be a hash, so to access the name, we're going to be using something like this. And here as well, we're going to do tag, and then here, all we're going to do is post count. So that should basically do it. So, I'm going to go over to the browser and hit reload, and everything should work just fine. Yeah. Without any issues, right? So maybe the order of the tags changed a little bit, but you can always fix up the order in the query if you need to adjust, by alphabet or whatever. You can put that into one of the clauses in the queries. So that will wrap it up for this video. I hope you guys found this useful, and I hope you didn't find this too difficult. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below, and I will try my best to answer your questions. And I hope you guys like this episode and share it with your friends and family. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. There's a lot of cool content coming. And I'm sorry for releasing this episode a little bit late in the week, because it took me a while to prepare everything and get everything sorted, because this one is a pretty big episode. Alright guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will see you guys in the next video.